Well, hey, friends, welcome to the Worship Circle podcast. I'm honored to have a new friend, but also somebody who's impacted my life. Andy, I think it was right when Where There Is Faith came out. I was not really at the time following truth, but heard that song on the radio, and it was at a point in my life when my granddad had just passed away, and God just met me with that song. And so I heard friends of mine invited me to go to Mount Perrin Church here in Atlanta. You guys, I think it was like your first time on the road.
It probably was, yeah.
And loved the concert, got done, and you guys did a meet and greet in one of the back rooms, and I remember meeting you and just saying thank you. And here we are many years later.
many years later, yes.
many years later, but thanks for jumping on with us. And
sure.
Man, just a big fan. The first thing I'll say is there's, as a vocal coach, and this, part of your work is to try to help people sound like them that God created them to be.
Right, yeah.
And the first time I heard your vocal, I was like, that is so unique and awesome. I was like, unbelievable. And so you probably heard that growing up, but when in your life was it like, man, you've got a really cool tenor voice, Andy Chrisman?
Well, thank you. Well, I heard that a lot growing up, but I grew up in a small town, in a small community outside Waco, Texas, and there weren't a lot of musicians. It was, most people graduated, went straight to work in a factory or on a farm or whatever, and there were no role models to look up to really in that part of Waco. So
right.
I just sang and thought I had a decent voice until I went to college, and then I started to get into some groups and some bands and began to kind of refine my sound. But it wasn't until I got into Truth in 1987 that I was labeled the loudest singer
really
ever by the sound guys that I worked with. They're just like, well, you got to do something because we can't mix this. It's like, you got a good voice, but it's really loud. So my first mentor was a guy named Gordon Twist.
Okay.
And Gordon had been in Truth back in the early 70s in that very first group. And he had gone on to be a vocal producer on Broadway.
Okay.
And Roger Breland, the guy that owned Truth, would bring him back every 3 or 4 months to do boot camps and vocal training with the group.
Yeah.
And he first got a hold of me, and he really changed my concept of what singing is and what performance is, and really how to not unlock my gift, but how to use it in a way that reached down into people instead of just, getting to their ears to go that next level down. And I've taken so much of what he taught me in those early days, and it's what I teach my clients now that I work with. Just about the power of personality and how to really unlock that. And like you said earlier, and I appreciate that, I feel like I've had a unique voice. I've always tried to sound like Kenny Loggins or, there's a lot of pop icons out there that I've always tried to emulate. But, when you can work with someone and they can pull that, like, I love how you said it earlier, that unique you out of you, that voice that only you have.
Right.
And usually it takes someone working with you. So I've had a real privilege of being able to do that with several artists over the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, it's a beautiful gift. What are maybe just one or two things that when you're listening to somebody for the first time, you're trying to pick up on, or,
Yeah. Well, pitch is number one, right?
Yeah.
You don't get on stage and you don't have any success without really great pitch.
Right.
And there are people I've heard live that are like close, but they still make me feel something, right? So pitch is number one. Power is the second thing. And we know a lot of singers who have really beautiful voices, but they don't have any power behind them.
Right.
And so it's really hard to capture someone's attention. I always say that pitch gets you on stage. Power turns the listener your direction. But it's that third thing. It's personality and passion that makes the listener want to hear you sing a second song.
That's good.
And hopefully, and they think, I hope they have an album I can listen to, or they have music somewhere I can take home with me once they're done singing live. And those are the things that I'm looking for in an artist. Are they singing great on pitch without the help of auto-tune, which you and I can spot that a mile away. We've been doing this long enough, right? Do they command my attention, but do they make me want to come back?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some Russ Taff. is a great
right.
example of that for people who know classic Christian music.
Yeah.
Ron Hemby, Leon Patillo. I just had him on my podcast this past week. There are voices out there that they're really great voices, but they also make you lean in and go, wow, they're really sharing something of themselves with me.
Yeah, this is an in the weeds question because most people will never know this name, but did you ever meet Tommy Funderburk?
No, I know Tommy, but I know of Tommy, but I've never gotten to meet him.
Same kind of deal. Like, I mean, I remember hearing him on the end of Amy Grant's Lead Me On song going, oh, who is that guy? And then Bill Champlin was on there and it was like, tell me more. And friends of mine turned me on to the What If album of Bob Wilson playing drums. And I was like, what a great vocal, you know? But I love that.
A great vocal can overcome mediocre songs, can overcome mediocre production, you know, but it's when all those things come together when you've really got something special.
Andy, how did your faith journey intersect with your singing history? Did it kind of come online at the same time? Was faith journey start before you started singing?
I grew up in the church.
Okay.
My mom was the WMU leader in our little Baptist church in Waco, Texas, and my dad was head deacon. And it was a really small church. I like to say that the average age of the church was deceased. It was really old, and lots of, not very many kids. There's only 2 of us in the youth group, and I don't know. I just grew up going to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. My brother led me to the Lord when I was 11 in the floorboard of his little Pinto when we were up at John Brown University where he was going to school. He just asked me point blank, Andy, have you made Jesus Lord of your life? And I was like, I don't think I have. So we settled it right then and there. And I remember getting in the car with my dad right after that. And we were heading back to Waco, and I told him about it. And he said, son, that's great, but I bet you've done that 1,000 times already up to this point. But now you have one moment in history you can look at and say, I can point to that moment where I made Jesus Lord of my life. So I was a typical church kid. I knew the Bible. I knew all the Bible stories. I felt like there was good preaching around me. My parents were, they were very solid in their faith. I remember my parents both reading their Bibles every morning when I was getting ready for school. And there was always Christian music playing in the house. And it's one of those things where I was surrounded by it.
Right.
But I didn't really make a stand for Jesus until I got to college.
Yeah.
And I started leading worship in college at my college church. And then that was, those are those. And I think probably many of us could point back to maybe our late high school, early college years as those days when we would be able to look and say, I really started following Jesus with my whole heart at that point.
Right.
So that's, but singing was always a way for me. So I was leading worship. We didn't call it worship back then.
Right.
But I was leading the hymn service at my little Southern Baptist church when I was 15, 16 years old. They were paying me $25 a weekend to lead the hymns. And, that's how I learned to sight read and sight sing. And
that's great.
Kind of learned the basics of worship in those days. And I just always had a love for Christian music, discovering CCM, the Imperials, and Russ Taff, and Garmo and Key, and Leon Patillo, and Silver Wind, and all these bands of the late 80s and late 70s and early 80s. And I just felt like that's something I'm supposed to do. And I would have deacons come up to me. We didn't call it prophesying in the Baptist church.
Right.
But I had deacons that would come up and put their hands on my shoulders after I sang, and they said, you're going to do this for the rest of your life. Wow. So, I spent the better part of 4 or 5 years after that just trying to figure out, well, how do I do that?
Right.
Where does that lead me, and how does this happen?
Sure.
So I feel like there's always been that calling. There's always been that spark in my heart that things happened spiritually when I sang.
Yeah.
And I knew that God was in that. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I chased for a long time. And I do mean chased, like asking the question, what is this for? What am I doing? How does this matter to the kingdom? Mm-hmm. What more could I put into it? Am I going the right direction in this? Which ultimately led me to worship. We can talk about that later, but through all of that, those questions of chasing after the purpose of why God gave me this voice led me into full-time worship ministry.
So did you try out for Truth at some point? Because I know, and for those of you listening that might be younger or whatever, I mean, you guys, Truth was like a platform that launched a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
who could just had an amazing gifting and singing, and so I mean, from Melody Tunney on, there's so many.
That's right.
So many amazing people that were part of that. But did somebody just say, "Hey, Andy, there's a Truth tryout. You're going to go"?
So no, this is an interesting story. When you talk about when did I understand the intersection between my gift and my calling.
Right.
My pastor, when I was in college, my pastor did a series of sermons called The Waiting Zone. And he talked about how every major character in the Bible goes through this waiting period between the time they're called and the time that God actually puts them in the place where he wants to use them. So, obviously Moses, 40 years after he leaves Egypt. David, anywhere from I don't know, 20 to 25 years after he's anointed king or by Samuel. There are these long periods, even Jesus, we don't even know what Jesus was doing between the time he got lost in the temple and the time that he was at the wedding of Cana. So there was he just kept preaching this message over and over again. And it was great for college students because, what are we doing? We're trying to finish our degrees and then go, then what, God? Well, we all want significance in life. So I really took that to heart. It really spoke to me. And I just remember getting on my knees for a season and saying, okay, God, what do you want?
Yeah.
I'll do anything. Just let me know what it is and I'll wait. I'll be patient. I won't jump the gun.
Right.
And it was wild. I got this call from Roger himself at my apartment in college. And the longer stories, we won't go into detail, but 10 years earlier, he tried to hire my brother to take Steve Green's place when Steve was leaving the group. And it didn't work out. And he was at my brother's church, and my brother had a church in Oklahoma City. And after the concert, Roger went up to my brother Jerry and said, okay, well, we're losing another guy. Do you want to come? Now's the time. And he said, here's my brother's number. He's the same age I was when you tried to hire me 10 years ago. So I literally get a call out of the blue from Roger saying, hey, I've met with your brother. He thinks you could handle a spot in Truth. Why don't you fly out and meet us? And he hired me right on the spot after I sang a few notes.
That's so cool.
Off I went on my career.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So were Mark and the guys on board yet at that point?
Mark was. Yeah, Mark had been there. So I joined the group in February of 87. Yeah. And Mark had been there 4 or 5 months earlier. Yeah. And then once I got there, Marty McGehee came along about 3 months after that. And then Kirk came along a few months after that. So by the summer of 1987, what would end up being for him had taken its place in Truth, the four of us. And then we spent over 3 years together singing. And that equals about 1,000 concerts. We were doing about 330 to 340 shows a year.
Unbelievable.
In Truth. So we had 1,000 concerts under our belt before we ever took off and did our thing as for him.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Man, they came to, this is after you guys were there, they came to Northside United Methodist one time. I was in college and I wanted to be a session player, like guitar. And so a friend of mine knew Roger, and Dana was playing guitar at the time.
Oh, Dana Capolino, yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, man, they're going to give you an audition. And I was so scared. So I had to go home and learn some song that night and come back the next morning. I go back, I come in, the band graciously let me plug in. I had like a Korg A3, and I'll never forget Andy, the drummer, counts the song off with 4 clicks and throws up.
What?
Yeah, he was sick.
Was it Mike Childers?
Whoever it would have been. And like,
I bet it was.
Yeah, he's like 3, 4, and he threw up, and everybody started laughing. And I'm like, well, this is starting well.
Wow. Is this an omen?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm not supposed to play sessions. And I did end up playing some sessions here in Atlanta and still play acoustic mainly on stuff. But it was just, that was my interaction with kind of understanding that road life, because it was like those guys had just rolled out of bed and they were being so kind to come in, and Dana was like helping me with my gear.
I tell worship pastors this all the time, and especially the ones that I lead. here at my church in Tulsa, I'm pretty notorious for saying, get your rear end up here.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care if you just sprained your ankle or hurt your back or you've got 102 or you've been throwing up all night or you had you know, you're not feeling great. I don't have a lot of sympathy for it because you're right. Back in those days, you roll out of bed and you go. You don't, because in the entertainment world, you don't show up, someone's going to take your spot.
Yeah.
So you just learn. You learn to push through it. You learn to,
amazing,
to get up there no matter what. And I have a lot of those stories in my life.
Yeah.
There's no reason I should have been on stage or even have made the trip, but I was there. I don't know if that's smart or not, but it just showed me, what it did show me was, man, God meets you every time you take a step toward him. Just go do it. It'll be okay. You may not feel like it. You may not feel like you're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And just do it. And God's so much more faithful than we give him credit for.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you guys at some point transition into For Him.
Uh-huh.
And there's, I'm sure, hours worth of stories we can camp out with all those years. But just what was it like, especially, going from Truth to now we're in the studio with some people that you end up having lifelong respect for, and that journey, what was it like kind of making that transition? Did it require more from you in a different way?
It was different. It was just different because, Truth didn't really have a lot of, a lot of respect in Nashville, even though Truth supplied Nashville with all their session singers and session players and so many artists out there that were having great careers.
Right.
For some reason, Roger Breland and Truth didn't get a lot of respect in Nashville. So we didn't spend a lot of time there. We didn't get to know a lot of other artists there.
Yeah.
We didn't play festivals. We didn't do co-bill tours. We were just kind of out on our own. So we didn't know any of the other Nashville artists. So when we did get to Nashville, and our career started, it was wild being around all my heroes.
I can't imagine.
And I'll put a plug in here for my podcast called One Degree of Andy, where I sit down with all of these heroes of mine that I got to meet along the way.
Right.
And Brian Duncan is one of those guys. Or my first GMA.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
My first GMA, I'm at the Renaissance Hotel, and the elevator door opens up, and I walk on with Brian Duncan.
Was that Lunatic Friend album era?
Oh my gosh.
That whole thing with Porcaro playing drums. What a great record. Great. Yeah.
It's all so good. I just remember getting on the elevator with him and going, oh my gosh, you're Brian Duncan.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, you're Andy with For Him.
Wow.
And we had the best conversation. And we talked about it on the podcast not long ago, just like that. There was a brotherhood, once you got in there,
right.
There was a brotherhood of we're all doing the same thing and we're all cheering each other on. But it was weird at first because you kind of feel like you don't belong.
Right.
You've got our songs on the radio just went up the charts immediately.
Sure.
And so we knew that people loved what we did, but you don't see yourself that way when you go. You still feel like low man on the totem pole when you go into Nashville, like you're trying to prove yourself. And that took a long time for me personally. I can't speak for the other guys, but it took a long time for me to accept my place in the Christian music industry as one of their core artists.
Yeah. Well, you guys, it's just amazing because Jackie Street passed away years ago, but Jackie came and played with me one time in Chattanooga, and we went out for Mexican food, and I was like, Jackie, those years in Nashville with Christian music they were literally like a renaissance for me.
Wow.
You guys, Susan, Wayne was producing all this stuff with Gordon. It was before they were doing the country thing. And it was like Charlie Peacock everybody was just so creative in those days, and people were still getting together as human beings in rooms and making music.
That's right. Yeah.
It was such a beautiful time. And, we'll hit on the podcast here in a minute, but it's just been such a gift to me. And I know so many. One of our taglines at Worship Circle is "You're loved and not alone." But listening to your podcast is one of God's way of reminding me that He's been with me all along. Because each of these artists you bring on, I'm like, yep, listen to Gary Chapman. Yep, listen to this one. Listen to that. And these songs and Russ. And I ended up on a tour bus with Russ one time with John Hammond and Jackie.
Oh, man.
We went on
Good for you.
They did a festival in James Holohan was on there, and my buddy goes, "Hey, it was David Cleveland." He goes, "I can't tech for James. Can you jump on the bus and go up to Cornerstone or something?" And I'm like, "Sure." It was about the same time I had auditioned for Truth, so I ended up on a bus with Russ and the gang for 2 days, and I'll never.
Good for you, wow.
Dude. It marked me. All of a sudden, I'm this young kid in college on a stage with these other Christian artists, and we're praying together, and I'm helping Russ and James with their guitars, and it was got all these people you have on, all that to say, all the songs, man. It's just such a ministry to me, and I know so many, because it really is a recording of God's faithfulness through our life to hear these melodies and hear these voices that have impacted all of us so much.
Yeah, I encourage people all the time, don't abandon that era of Christian music. I like to call it the golden era of CCM.
Yeah.
From like 78 to 2002, maybe 2001, before everything really changed. And I'm addicted to the K-Love 80s and 90s streams on their app.
Yeah.
And I've just found a new one called CCM in 3D.
Yeah.
That's like a real radio station from the 90s, and it's fabulous. I listen to it every single day when I work out or when I go for a run. It's like, and those songs, like you said earlier, the musicianship and the writing and the performance and the production, every album was different. Every album had some sort of defining thing about them that made you go, I'm a fan of that and that and that. And they're all completely different. You could listen to Christian radio back in the day and, in an hour hear Twyla Paris, Petra, DC Talk, Newsboys, For Him, Carmen, Audio Adrenaline, and DeGarmo and Key. I mean, it was literally everything. Yeah. And I think it's worth going back and revisiting that. I just posted the other day about I heard a song again from Lisa Bevel.
Yeah.
Produced by Mark Heimerman.
Yeah, My Freedom album was so good.
Oh my gosh. It's just, you go, that's what's possible.
Right.
And I wish we had it again, but I'm not crying about it. It's there if we want to go listen to it again.
Well,
and I think it's a great thing to go back and listen to.
Yeah, you had Rick Florian on that concert. I went to the Heart Attack tour. It was Milan and Whiteheart.
Oh, wow.
And that Freedom album, when it came out, I was like, this is like the Pet Sounds of Christian rock, This is like, all these songs are so good. And one story I'll tell you, I'll never forget. We were doing this conference at North Point called Drive, and I was playing and leading some. And man, before I knew it, this is like the first or second year with John Maxwell. I'm at the packing up, and this guy comes up in a like a sport coat and jeans. It's Dana Key.
Oh, wow.
He goes, "Todd, man, you sound great."
Oh, you knew your name.
Dude, I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's just, like you say, it's a brotherhood and it's a family. It's just God just uses all these moments and all these just sweet brothers and sisters that we're all on this journey toward, eternity with Jesus. And it's just amazing. And for those of us that were around during that era, it's such a sweet thing, man.
And can I just say too that, again, the podcast brings this out, but it's something that I already remember feeling back in the day is we're all just figuring it out.
Yeah.
Nobody's got it completely nailed. We're all figuring it out. We're trying to all work together, but also come up with our own voice and own sound.
Yeah.
And it's something I can take to worship leaders as well, just to go, it's not been figured out yet, guys. I know worship's been going on for 6,000 years or before that, if we read about what's going on in heaven, but we still haven't figured it all out. Just keep looking, keep finding your voice, keep trying new things, keep dreaming about what worship and music could be. And, I think when we get to heaven, we'll continue to explore, because if God is truly endless, even in eternity, we won't see the end of him, which means there's more to explore. There's more to create. There's more to get in the laboratory and in the studio. And I believe everything we're doing here that's good, we'll do in heaven.
Yeah.
And I believe there'll be studios in heaven.
Yeah.
I believe there'll be laboratories in heaven. I believe there'll be libraries in heaven and books continuing to be written. I think that, it excites me as a musician is that we're just scratching the surface. So don't stop.
Yep.
don't stop. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. And that's one of the attitudes that I brought with me into the worship world from,
Sure.
being in Christian music for 20 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you kind of transition into that because I know there really was that golden age where there's so many good songwriters and producers and artists and so much creativity. And then all of a sudden the whole worship thing starts happening where some of these songs that we're singing in church are on the radio. And then there's people trying to get them on the radio so we can sing them in church. What was that like for you? Just that season kind of turning into that over the years?
So I was visited by God, and I'm gonna preface this by saying, I'm still not sure to this day if God visited me, if He took me to heaven, if it was a dream, whatever it was incredibly real. And this was around somewhere between 98 and 99, and we had just finished a really big concert with thousands of people. And I was in my hotel room, and I woke up around 3 a.m. with this vision really fresh on me. And the vision was I was standing before the Lord at the end of time. I had all of my trophies, all of my awards, and I laid them down at His feet and waited to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And all God did was go, "Huh." Shrugged his shoulders. It wasn't a negative reaction, but it wasn't the reaction I was looking for. And I was a knots.
Yeah.
God, I was in knots in my gut, in my heart, in my spirit, just going, "Oh no." You start asking those questions. What am I doing?
Right.
What is this? Which I've learned now, 30 years later, those are really good questions to ask in seasons of your life. You should take time to ask those questions. But then I really took some time and I started asking those questions of God, of my family, of my mentors, pastors that were, that had an influence in my life and had all access to me. And what it came down to was I realized I'd been running from that original calling.
Yeah.
When I said earlier that these deacons would put their hands on my shoulders and said, "This is what you're going to do the rest of your life."
Wow.
I was upset.
Yeah.
Because in the early 80s, I didn't want anything to do with worship music.
Sure.
I just wanted to go sing pop music.
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, you can't outthink Him. You can't outrun Him. You can't, outmaneuver God. He went, "Go ahead. I'll make a way for you." And He graciously tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Now let's start moving back into worship." Well, we all know that there was an exodus in the late 90s, early 2000s of artists back to the church. And so my theory is that the artists who were so dense in the church in the 60s and 70s had something to say beyond the church walls, and God allowed them to go out and do something unique. But then at some point, the artists never got their start in the church again. It was all about, if you got a talent, go to Nashville. Don't go to your local church. So basically, the artist had left the church. I felt like God said, "I want the artist back into the church."
Right.
And so I wrestled with that for a long time. I was real honest with the other 4 hymn guys and just said, "Hey, it's what God's doing in my heart. I don't know what to do. I feel like I should put a little time limit on my future with 4 hymn. And I don't have a plan. I'm just going to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit." So I ended up in 2000 saying yes to a pastor friend of mine's, one of those pastors that had all access to my life.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, I'm starting a church in Orlando.
Okay.
Would you come be my worship pastor and help me start this church?" And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I think that's what we're supposed to do. So we packed up our family in 2000, moved from Mobile, Alabama to Orlando, started a church with him. And I was there about 5 years. And if anybody started a church before, it's hard. I don't ever want to do it again.
Yeah.
And I still had to tour. So I was touring Wednesday through Saturday and then flying home Sunday morning.
Wow.
And Todd, can I just tell you the faithfulness of God in 5 years? 5 years. Let's multiply that by 52 weekends.
Yeah.
In 5 years, I never missed a flight. I was never delayed, never missed a connection.
Wow.
Every single time I got to my church, every single Sunday I got to my church to lead worship. There's some nail biters, but every single time I was there for worship. And I saw God's sovereignty in that. I'm like, okay, I can trust you in all these things. So that was it for me. You know, I started to kind of extract myself out for him, and you know, was doing less and less dates, and we were starting to wrap things up, and everyone's kind of feeling that same pull to go do other things besides the group.
Right.
And so I don't know, for me, when you ask what was that transition like, it started with God just coming to get me.
Yeah.
He did. He literally came and got me and said, let's go do this now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of you, but you got other things to do.
That's cool.
And as I look back now, I realized that those trophies I was holding was not what he wanted me to bring him. He wanted me to bring in people.
Mm-hmm.
And then what church is all about is we're bringing people to the Lord. That's what worship's all about.
Yeah.
Is we're bringing the family of God into his throne room to fellowship with him and to worship him. And, you know, again, 30 years later, I can see that vision with such more clarity. And I know that's even deeper than that, and God will continue to show me more. But I see with such clarity now what God was speaking to me in my life.
That's so good. Thanks for sharing that, Andy. What point did you transition to Church on the Move? Because I know you were there quite a while.
Yeah. Things started to go a little south at that church. Most of the staff left. The church never grew. I mean, I don't think we got over 80 people in 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was angry.
Yeah.
You know, I had my contemporaries. Charles Billingsley comes to mind, who's a very dear friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Charles saying, hey man, you still enjoying leading worship? I'm like, yeah, of course. And he goes, that's good to hear, because I just got an offer to go for my first worship job at Thomas Road Baptist Church.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, gee, thanks a lot, God.
Yeah.
You've got me, you know, over here in oblivion, and no one's coming to my church.
Yeah.
And yet you just take Charles and plop him into one of the biggest Baptist churches in the world.
Mm.
And I wrestled with that for a long time. And you know, the Holy Spirit really did a work in my life. He said, I called you here, I will call you out.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife and I would just pray every single day. God, we're listening. Whenever you call us, we'll go. And Willie George called me out of the blue one day and just said, hey, we've been thinking about you. He had sent a bunch of his staff to work at our church, you know, on and off over the years. He said, I feel like you belong at Church on the Move. And so that we made the switch. We, you know, we packed up everything, and it was I felt like it was going to be a hard sell to our kids who were like 10 and 7 at the time.
Right.
Hey guys, we're leaving Disney World and going to Tulsa, going to Oklahoma. And, but they loved it. You know, it was a great move for us. And it was really beautiful to see. You know, I tell that story about Charles Billingsley and how I'd watched him just go to one of the biggest churches in the world right out of the blue. I remember my second Christmas at Church on the Move. And if anybody knows about our Church on the Move Christmas experiences, they were pretty massive, not on the level of like Prestonwood or anything like that, but we made our mark in the church world with those Christmas shows. And I remember after about the second year of being here, I just finished the last Christmas show. It's Christmas Eve. Everybody in my house had gone to bed, but you know this, Todd, you're still kind of jacked up and on a high. There's no way you're going to lay down and go to sleep after all those shows. And I was up in our media room and I was just flipping the channels, and guess who I saw on TV? Charles Billingsley.
Yeah.
And I've told him this story. We talk about this all the time. I saw him at Shades Mountain in San Diego.
Wow.
And he was doing his thing. And I wept. It's like I finally broke and I wept. And I said, God, thank you for doing what you need to do in my life and not allowing me to just go where I see my friends going.
Yeah.
Because I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah.
And I would not want to be where Charles is. That's not me. It's not my calling.
Right.
I belong here. So I've had a really great time here. I've been here 20 years now.
Yeah.
I'm not on full-time staff. I have my new title right now is Senior Worship Pastor in Residence.
That's beautiful.
So all that means is I don't have to go to meetings.
Yeah.
Which I negotiated about 4 years ago. Just said,
great?
I just not going to meetings anymore. There are other things I want to do, and I love it here. I still want to lead worship. I still want to coach all your worship leaders and do vocal instruction. And and just be here as a, as a consultant, a high-end consultant on what worship should be and where it should go. So it's been a really good journey for me.
Gosh. Well, what a ride, man. And it's so cool to see God show you those different things. All those years in Orlando and Florida, and then coming out to Tulsa and still doing it.
I wouldn't be who I am today.
Yeah.
If I'd missed one of those steps.
Sure.
And I thank God every day for the frustration years, for the loneliness years, for the questioning years. Even here at Church on the Move, there are times where you just go, gosh, what am I doing here? Like what's my purpose, and why, again, you wrestle with that going, why can't I be where Mark Harris is? Look what he's getting to do.
Yeah.
I don't get to do that here. Look where Todd Fields is.
Right.
I'd love to be where he is. Look what he gets to do.
Yeah.
I don't get to do that here. And then you get past it and you go, wow, God, you really knew what you were doing. I just need to take a deep breath and ask the questions again.
That's so amazing. I have a friend that says, turns out God knows how to be God. And you could probably see this, but we believe this by faith, but the longer we live, I think we see it, that God loves us too much not to close a door when it needs closing.
That's right.
And he's never going to give us a snake or a rock, And so for any of you guys listening out there, it's like, I just had a friend call me today, said, man, I got let go. And I'm not going to try to give him a Sunday school answer in a text, but I know in my heart that God's not done.
That's right.
And we feel in the minute we get traumatized and panic, what am I going to do? But I've never seen God not have a plan. And, if we can just learn to take a deep breath and go, you're orchestrating things for my best and what you want to accomplish with the brief amount of time I have left here on this planet. But
my theory is that, listen, if Jesus is Lord of your life and you're always chasing after the heart of God, you can't make a mistake. Now I say that, not saying morally or anything gross, but you can't make a mistake in ministry and life, because if you're following after the leading of the Holy Spirit, and you really believe God has appointed you to do this, well, let's just say you choose to leave your position and go somewhere else. Was it the right thing to do? Does it matter?
Yeah.
God's not outsmarted. God's not up there going, gathering the angels around going, guys, Andy just left Church on the Move. What are we going to do?
Right.
He wasn't supposed to do that. No, he does. He's God.
Yeah.
Right. So he's great at being God. And, or if you get let go, right? And let's just say you get let go and you felt it was wrong.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So you don't think God can use that and take care of you? God is undefeated.
Yeah.
And he won't, Roger Breland always used to say, God's not going to mess up his perfect record in your life.
Yeah.
So take a breath, as hard as it is when you get let go.
Yeah.
Or you get demoted. Sure. Right. Or what do we see with so many worship pastors that we're around? They feel like they're getting encroached upon by the next generation, or by an executive pastor, or someone a creative director comes in and kind of, feel like their thumb is on them and they can't do the things they want to do. Take a breath.
Yeah.
God is undefeated, and he's doing something in your life, and you're going to learn something through this. But on the other side, he's got his plan is going to continue. And we just have to choose to say, okay, Lord, what do you want to do?
Amazing.
What do you want to do?
You would say the same thing, but I would not be doing anything I'm doing now had doors not closed.
That's right.
At the time I was like, Lord, this is terrible. What are you doing? But it all led to, it's almost like I told a buddy who's now with Jesus, Reggie Campbell, who helped me with Start Worship Circle. It was like, I feel like God's trying to move us all into our own lane, and he's known it all along, but he just keeps bumping us into it. And then when we find that, man, it's like the guy in Chariots of Fire. I feel God's pleasure when I run. That's right. And all the other distractions he wants to whittle away to get us there.
That's right.
Hey, let's kind of wrap up talk. I want people to hear like what you're doing now, and the podcast is a big deal because I know from talking to you that that's really kind of picking up steam. But just for our listeners, it's 1 Degree of Andy. Tell them a little bit more about where they can hear it and what you see God doing with it all.
Yeah. So I started this about 3 years ago. I have a radio show as well called Worship with Andy Chrisman. We're on hundreds of stations around the world. I play worship music for 2 hours every weekend and talk to worship artists like Phil Wickham and Chris Tomlin and, Josh Baldwin and all these people. But we basically it's a radio show that worships God for 2 hours and tells them about what he's doing in our lives. But I had the idea to expand that into classic Christian music.
Yeah.
And I just started it on my own a couple of years ago. And there was just an instant audience for it.
Wow.
And it really took off. So I had about 100 episodes under my belt with it. And I was approached by K-Love.
Right.
And they have a podcast company called Access More. And they were like, hey, we love what you're doing. We don't have anything like this. And it's silly of us to be under the K-Love umbrella and not have a music-specific podcast. So I've been with them since January, and it's been really, really good. They're able to take my podcast to a whole different level. So you can go to accessmore.com where you can hear the podcast and see the video of the podcast. It's also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and just about wherever you would listen to your favorite podcast. But it's weekly, and I've got some really great guests coming up. I mentioned Leon Patillo. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but right now Leon Patillo is on. I've got Jason Crabb coming on. I've got Phillips Craig and Dean.
Yeah.
I've got a wonderful episode with For Him and Point of Grace all in the room together.
No way.
It's chaos and it's wonderful.
Did y'all record that on the cruise?
We did. Yeah, we recorded that on the cruise. Russ Lee of New Song, who's a former Truth guy, is coming on. The guys from VeggieTales, the guys that created VeggieTales are coming on, and they're gonna be part of it. So, we've had people like Mike Warnicki and Shonda Pierce and people from the industry, like producers like Michael Amardian and Peter Wolf, and industry people like John Still, who created CCM Magazine. So just really a lot of great conversations if you're interested in that era of music.
Yeah, I highly recommend it for anyone. I mean, I remember hearing you and Joel with PFR the other day, and I'm like, I'm so excited they're recording again.
That was a good one, yeah.
Yeah, I saw them here in Atlanta back in the day, and I was like, man, for 3 people, they're really doing it, But you guys check out the 1 Degree of Andy podcast. Unbelievable. How you're also doing some consulting and vocal coaching. How can people connect with you that way?
It's andychrisman.com.
Okay.
Or I'm all over social media, and I'm really good about getting back. And that's one thing Todd, just between me and you and having people listening.
Yeah.
Just return a text.
Yeah.
Return an email. It's not that hard. I know it's my personality, but there's so many people that I'm like, I've known for 20 years. Yeah. And you can't get them to answer a social media message or a text.
Yeah.
And I'm really good about that. I just, I don't put myself above anybody. I just want to connect with people. And my passion is to help worship pastors finish their race, to create long-lasting cultures of worship in churches that can be repeated beyond this generation.
That's great.
And to help vocalists that are singing week to week become the best they can be. You talked about that earlier, about finding their true voice. Yeah. But that also comes with health. You have to have a plan. If you're going to get healthy, right? You're going to have to follow an eating plan. You're going to have to follow an exercise plan. You're going to have to get disciplined. And so many worship leaders have just been thrown on stage because they show a gift for singing and leading. And then they wake up 2 years later and their voice doesn't work right. They don't like what they hear. Yeah. They don't feel like they're going anywhere and they're about to give up. Yeah. So I love to have that as part of my package to say, I can get you healthy and I can give you really great practices, not to sound like me, but to use the things that I've used. Todd, I'm 58 years old.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm still singing with as much energy and passion and precision as I did in my 20s because I work out my voice. I work it. I know how to get what I want out of it. And I've developed a curriculum with that I feel like is
awesome.
It's undefeated. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, check that out, andychristian.com. And Andy, you and Mark are going to be with the Worship Circle team.
Yes, we are.
In Dallas, May 1 to 3. So if you're listening, even if you're not in the Dallas area, get on a plane. And we are, the theme of this time is where your heart is integrated with your story. I just botched the tagline, Andy. But
try it again. Take two.
Yeah, basically it's we want to pay attention to how our heart impacts how our story impacts our song. That's it. Where your story impacts your song. And many of us really have, I know for me, I'm in a season where I'm really paying attention to my family of origin story, and how when we see how the enemy tried to come after us and has been basically all our life, but definitely in the formative years, he always comes after us in the areas where God's going to get the most glory with our gifting.
That's right.
And so when we see that, you see inside the matrix, it allows you to stand up behind a mic and with people and know that you have a name God gave you that he gave no one else. And that's kind of where we're going. So Kathy Lorzell will be with us, and Paul Balosh and Meredith Andrews. It's going to be a great time. But can't wait to see you there, brother. And man, thank you for getting back to me so fast. I was like, when you're talking about that being a thing, every time I email you, you're like, bam, right back. I'm like, that's very rare these days. Usually it's like,
let's make it not rare. All right, everybody listening.
Yeah,
you don't want
the Apple Mail thing to pop up that says follow up because no one responded for the past 3 or 4 days.
I cannot stand it. It just gives me the willies seeing somebody's phone and they've got like 1,200 unread messages. And I understand why, but I'm just like, just answer people.
Yeah.
Just answer people.
Yeah. Even just, hey, I'll get back to you,
Yeah, exactly.
Just acknowledge that there's a soul on the other end of that message.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm really looking forward to being there and, of course, hanging with you and fun. Paul. I love Paul so much. I haven't had a chance to hang out with a lot of the other people. And of course, Mark Harris is a brother to me.
Yeah.
So it'll be super fun and super real. And I just want to add value to what the Worship Circle is doing. And again, my passion is let's finish our races well.
Yeah.
Let's don't quit before the finish line.
No, well, man, you're family. We're all family, and I just love connecting with you. Thanks for your willingness to jump on with us today and share your heart and your story. And man, we'll do it again sometime. We'll hit some other stuff. But for now, you guys, please check out Andy's podcast and go to his website. And I know he'll be able to help out your soul, your heart, and your church.
Thanks, man.